In this episode, we're talking to the Neighborhood Restaurant Group's Greg Engert. It's a long one, so let's get right into it. Hi, I'm Kevin Brooks, and this is No Pants During the Pandemic. Today I'm speaking with Greg Engert, managing partner of the insanely popular Neighborhood Restaurant Group based out of Alexandria, Virginia. Hey Greg, how you doing, man? It's been a while.
Kevin, always a pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. I feel like I don't talk to you anymore.
I know, just the occasional text. But we should do this more often.
Yes, we should. For those who don't know, Greg and I probably spoke pretty much every week when I was working at Shelton Brothers, and well, Greg was doing what Greg does now. We're at the Neighborhood Restaurant Group. But actually, for those who have been living in a cave for the past decade or so, or don't drink craft beer, why don't you tell us who you are?
Sure. So thanks, Kevin, and great to be on the show. I love the show. I am the managing partner and beverage director for Neighborhood Restaurant Group, which is a collection of unique independent bars, restaurants, and retail outlets and more based out of Northern Virginia originally, but also in DC.
Let's go pre-NRG. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I grew up in upstate New York and went to a Middlebury College up in Vermont. I thought I was going to be an English professor, and I was basically going to go to school forever and then become a teacher. So I studied at Trinity College in Dublin, the Goethe Institute in Munich, ended up in Georgetown back in 2002 for graduate work, did a couple of years of that, and like so many people realized that academia really wasn't the dream job.
How'd you get into the beer business?
Had a bunch of great friends from college in DC. Many of them were acting, and so therefore, of course, they were also serving and bartending. One of them, my friend Dave, was bartending at a bar called the Brickskeller, which I had known since I moved to DC. America's first beer bar. Opened in 1957 with something like 25 different bottles and cans on the menu, which is unheard of in the 50s. They'd gotten the Guinness Book of World Records for purveying the most commercially available beers in the world in like the late 90s, early 2000s. So they had hundreds, if not thousands, of different bottles and cans at the Brickskeller. So a really cool, storied place. The first sit-down beer tasting in America happened there in the early 80s. Michael Jackson, the famed beer and whiskey writer, would come there and do tastings annually on his birthday every year. I mean, it was a really major place back before beer was cool. So I went in there, never waited tables in my life, fell in love, not just with the beer aspect of it, but with like the hospitality aspect of it. I loved creating experiences around very special products, and we had special products in spades there at the Brickskeller. That's where I learned about lambic. That's where I learned about true lager beer, West Coast IPAs. It all started there. And I also got to meet the who's who of beer in the early 2000s, and I got to learn from all of them. It was really cool. I owe a lot to the Brickskeller. I mean, I cut my teeth there. I learned so much, and back then the internet wasn't, the magic answer to life's questions. So, if you wanted to learn things, you'd have to read like Ale Street News and Celebrator weekly, and we just devoured that stuff. We would read every single thing that Michael Jackson wrote or Roger Protz. And if you wanted to know what hops were in a beer, you'd literally call the brewery. They would answer, and you could ask them anything you wanted. They would tell you anything. It was really grassroots in some ways and really fun.
How do you go from Brickskeller to Neighborhood Restaurant Group?
The interest was burgeoning in craft, and things were changing. Breweries in America were starting to open at a pretty rapid clip. New stuff was available all the time. More people were interested. I kind of saw this opportunity to branch out and do my own thing, and also to kind of, add my own perspective to the mix. And so at that point, I was studying a lot of wine and influenced obviously by Garrett Oliver and Brewmaster's Table, and a lot that have been said by Michael Jackson about brewing traditions and how much respect and adulation we should be giving them, and started to think like, well, what if we could elevate the service and appreciation for beer to, the level of wine, leaving aside all of the pretense and ritual, really saying that all of these incredibly talented brewers the world over are pouring so much energy, passion, and brain power into these beers. But sometimes guests would just look at it and just think, oh, it's just beer. It's like, well, what if we elevated that service? What if we made sure that glassware was perfect, temperature was perfect, that beer and food was paired together for you, and that we told you the stories about the brewers and about the brewing traditions? We could really have something special. And as luck would have it, I met Michael Babin, who had opened the neighborhood restaurant group in 97 with a single entity called Evening Star Cafe. And then over the next few years, opened a couple others. And in 2006, he opened a beer property called Rustico in Alexandria, Virginia. I heard about this place and I was introduced to Michael. He was looking for somebody to help run the place and run the beer program there. And I was definitely interested, but I kind of told him about the ideas that I've been having. Like, this is what I think we could do. I would love to come and work with you on this project, but I definitely have some ideas for some new stuff. And he was basically like, one of the early conversations, he was like, well, let's just come on board. Let's get this one going, but also let's test out some of your ideas and theories here. And then look to build something bigger. So from the start in 2006, we began planning and plotting for what would become Churchkey and Birch Barley in 2009.
So Churchkey opens, and for lack of a better term, it's the flagship of that group. Mm-hmm. What was the thought behind Churchkey? What were you looking to do?
I was always fascinated with this idea of having a world-class beer bar and a phenomenal restaurant that incorporated beer into, the restaurant service without just doing something like beer cuisine or something where you cook with beer in every dish or something like that. We didn't want to do that, but we wanted to really encourage people to think about the way that food and beer pair. And that was what Birch Barley was downstairs, a modern American restaurant with great food, great service, great wines, great cocktails, and obviously amazing beers. And then upstairs, this world-class beer bar. We were the first people to ever design and install a temperature-controlled draft system so that we could serve crisp, refreshing pilsners at 42 degrees Fahrenheit, big, huge imperial stouts and barley wines at 54 degrees, and then everything else in between at 48 degrees, collecting a host of glassware, making sure that our dish machines were really calibrated to make sure the glasses came out squeaky clean and would showcase the beers properly, serving cask ale properly and in mass. 5 different engines, which back then was very cool. Today seems very old-fashioned, probably, and we still do it. We still love it. We're just trying to elevate it. I devised a flavor profile system because along the way, I was very, very aware that I was going to be probably looked at as, some kind of effete person making beer too precious or intellectualizing it or something like that. And so in an effort to not have that, we came up with this flavor profile system that would kind of categorically define and organize every beer in the world by very, very basic flavor profiles: crisp, hop, malt, roast, fruit and spice, smoke, tart, and funky. And this was designed to make beer accessible and to get people interested. And back in 2009, people got interested extremely fast. When we opened Churchkey and Birch Barley, we had a line out the door for every single service, at least for a couple hours for the first 2 or 3 months. It was just crazy. Runaway success. It was really, really cool, and basically allowed us to then open a host of other properties.
And now you've got about 20 properties. But one of the things that I find fascinating is that a group like Neighborhood Restaurant Group traditionally would basically cookie cutter. They'd make a chain with each place more or less being the same thing. You guys basically did the exact opposite, and pretty much every place is different.
It's interesting. We talk about it every day because honestly, we wish, I think, sometimes that we could just replicate, because there's so much more efficiencies to that. Restaurants and bars make very little money to begin with. So any little efficiency that you can realize is incredibly important. And so by kind of reinventing the wheel every time, we're layering in these, one could look at it as additional costs. And I always kind of joke that we're a large restaurant group that behaves like a really tiny, independent, single operator restaurant group. And that's true and not true. I mean, obviously we have an incredible group of people in our HQ team that are able to work at all the spaces and provide so much support, so many great ideas to all the spaces. But we love creating. It just never made sense that like, oh, Churchkey's a runaway success. Maybe we should have done this. We'd probably be wealthy right now. But instead of saying, let's do a bunch of Churchkeys all over the country, we were like, okay, well, we've done Churchkey, so now let's do a brewery. Or now let's do a Belgian spot like Sovereign that nobody's ever done before. We're always just kind of trying to think about how we can make an impact and contribute something that's new and different.
So what's wrong with doing the same thing as last time?
The second you do an additional location, the first location loses some of its, uniqueness. Maybe it doesn't feel as special to the people who have been flocking there. And maybe it's, there's just this authenticity question that we're all kind of grappling with. I don't know. It is definitely something that we struggle with, and I think what we've tried to do, because we want to expand. I mean, to this day, looking at new projects all the time. I mean, I'd love to be able to continue to pour the best beers in the world in every city in this country or suburb in this country, if I could, because I think now more than ever, we have a kind of, specific voice in craft beer. And, obviously you and I share a lot of opinions on that, but it just would never make sense to me to like do Churchkey. The other thing is that when we built Churchkey in 2009, we did a lot of things one way, but technology's changed over the past years. Tastes have changed. And so, there's similarities between Churchkey and Sovereign and Grand Delancey, but there's also a lot of differences. I think we're always trying to do bigger draft programs. That's funny because that became not popular. Like, oh, too many drafts, that can't be good. It's like, well, I guess not if people don't go to your spot and if it's filled with a bunch of crap. But like, in order for me to include, modern styles that people love, like, hazy IPA, pastry stouts, and fruited sours. I love those too. I want to keep them on there. But then also have a nice mix of both new school and old school lagers, classic dry Belgians, British bitters, Estonian porters. I can't do that on 20 draft lines. And so with 50, we've always kind of figured it out. And you got to be busy enough to rotate it through. And the other thing is like cask ale. I'll never forget when we were going to do two casks at Grand Delancey. People were like, you're doing cask? Meanwhile, if you go back 20 years, everybody had a cask, So I'm kind of relishing as I get older. I'm 41 and in becoming unfashionable. But luckily, I have a platform that gives me the opportunity to still promulgate now unfashionable tenets of beer drinking, like, cask beer, or now like having side pull faucets for lagers. Those are cool, but having a dozen lagers on tap is still something that not a lot of people do. We love doing it. So I think that there's a place for what we do pretty much anywhere, if only because the uniformity of the craft beer scene has kind of gotten a bit alarming over time. We've got some breweries out there now kind of bringing us back to classic styles, Suarez, Notch, Folks Beer, Halfway Crooks down in Atlanta. Love them, obviously. Even Bluejacket, our brewery, we brew tons of lagers. We love them. But it's hard to walk into a town now, any city, go to a beer shop or a beer bar and not see the same, three styles of beer. I had a friend just tell me the other day, he lives in Monterey, California. He's literally thinking about opening a beer shop there because he cannot get Trappist beers anywhere nearby.
That's crazy. When you decide to start a place, what's the checklist of, things that are going to go into it, food, beverage, service-wise?
The first thing we do is we look at a location that we like, and we immediately go to school on what that location needs. What's in the neighborhood? What's the demographic? What do people want there? And once we kind of figure that out, then we get to work on how we're going to go about doing it. I think a great example would be the Sovereign in DC. I always kind of wanted to do like this Belgian place that was unlike any Belgian place out there. At that time, in the 2014, 15, when I was thinking about it, all Belgian places served pretty much the same thing. Regional Belgian breweries, strong beers from those breweries, heavily marketed. A lot of the decisions on what you pour was based on how much free glassware and umbrellas you could get. A lot of the beers were brewed quickly, not given proper maturations, and basically tasted the same. Sweet, strong, and fruity. I have always had an interest in the other side of Belgian brewing. You get Lassen, de Ranca, Blogy, Thirier, just over the border in France. But then obviously Cantillon and Drie-Fonteinen. These are breweries that I had been obsessed with for a long time. And I was like, well, what if I built a Belgian bar that only served that and didn't serve Delirium Tremens or Chimay or Duvel? You know, there's still some crossovers like Saison Dupont, which you find pretty ubiquitous, but I still love and belong there. Other brewers too, like Roule, Tilcan, Decam, you know, and so I said, like, let's just focus on that. And then I was like, okay, cool, let's do 50 drafts and let's have a dozen of them from De La Seine and Duranca and another dozen from Thirier and Blogy. Now, half the list is 4 breweries that people have never heard of. It's almost like visiting them. If you come in, you can drink their beers. Then a space came up in Georgetown, a neighborhood in DC that's pretty wealthy, but also has a lot of students. And I was like, well, what could work there? What's something that maybe could be interesting to both students, but also some of these professionals that live there? And I was like, well, they probably know Belgian beer. They're probably interested in Belgian beer. So that'd be a good spot to do a Belgian beer bar and restaurant, but flip the script and do things that they wouldn't expect. And we kind of go from there. And it's been a great ride in Georgetown. People love it. And hopefully, fingers crossed, when we reopen finally in late spring, early summer, we're going to finally have the roof deck that we hope to have when we open. So it's going to be even better.
You finished building that?
We're about to start.
Oh!
What better time to start building it than during a pandemic when we aren't open?
Exactly.
That's going to be incredible. But you know, the thing is, I mean, Kevin, you can imagine, like, when we reopen Sovereign, it's going to be tough because nobody's been exporting beer. Most distributors in the U.S. have said, like, put a moratorium on new products, certainly on draft. That's starting to stop and come back now as things reopen. But, you know, I mean, a large part, and then, of course, Shelton Brothers' demise.
Still a lot of question marks.
A lot of question marks, unfortunately. And, you know, I relied for a bulk of the product that we served at Sovereign was through Shelton and all the great work with their great brewers. And so we're a little bit, like, up in the air and nervous.
I guess that leads me to ask, is the import beer market dead?
I still believe that no beer drinking experience is complete without import beers. I mean, right now I'm drinking one of the most incredible breweries in the world. It's called Schönrammer from Germany, from the southeast corner of Bavaria, close to Salzburg. It's an incredible brewery. This beer is the Grünhoppen Pils, which is so rare. It's their fresh hop from the fall. And it's incredible. I mean, there's no other way to say it. To think that these beers, and a great importer, Uplifter Spirits, and Mark Gerlach, a friend of mine who runs it, has been importing their beers forever, does an amazing job with it. But a world where I can't get these beers in the U.S. is just something I don't want to think about. Now, that said, I think I'm the only one on the East Coast who even gets it now because nobody seems to be as interested as we are. But yeah, I just can't imagine. I don't want to be in a beer world that doesn't have De La Seine and Schönram and Duranca at the ready. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't go away.
I have this feeling it's, while Shelton Brothers and Be United and 12%, and, they were all the higher end importers were trying to push the import sector out, and they did for years. I think it's going to wind up pulling back to being this niche market where a city has maybe 1 or 2 spots. DC is going to be a one of the few standouts because you have established spots that people love. Yeah, Philly will have Monks and then bits and pieces in a few other places. And Philly will probably be one of the stronger cities. New York will have 1 or 2 places.
Yeah, isn't that funny though? Like, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of like I hadn't really thought of this until just now, but I remember 20 years ago when I got started doing this, my thought was like, it's crazy that you can only get these beers in a very few spots in a city, right? You got to seek them out. I'm like, Orval should be on every shelf. It should be available in every bar, and that was our goal. And same with like Sierra Nevada, which was obviously more ubiquitous, but like I remember drinking Stone Ruination for the first time in like 2003, maybe right after it came out. I think it came out around then. And being like, I can't believe what I just tasted. I've never tasted anything like this. It's absolutely incredible. Everybody should want this and be able to get it. And back in 2004 at the Brix Gallery, you couldn't. I mean, it was Bombers of Ruination were really hard to come by. Fast forward 10 years and it's everywhere in 12-ounce bottles, right? In fact, speaking of Stone, talking to Greg Cook about it one time, and he was like, it's funny. This is what we wanted. As much as we get upset that like, oh, craft beer was everywhere and big brewers are buying small brewers, and now there's a kind of monoculture of hazy IPA. I mean, these are the unintended consequences of craft beer's rise in popularity that, a lot of us get nostalgic for the good old days. Well, to your point, the good old days may be upon us. Like, if you want a 750 milliliter bottle of Saison DuPont, you may have to hunt for it again. And you know what? I guess I'm okay with that. As long as it doesn't go away. And that's where things like, Be United kind of shrinking the amount of beers that they're bringing in, and Shelton Brothers being just gone, and those brands kind of being up in the air right now. And, all the brands that 12% used to bring in, they don't bring in anymore, like Gose. Like Thornbridge. You can't get Thornbridge. Remember when it was hard to get Thornbridge? Everybody wanted it. Now, Be United doesn't even bring it in anymore.
Yep, but yeah, I pray that it doesn't go away, and that it's just down to this little hardcore group, because then a small, nimble company can come in and maybe learn from some of the mistakes that have been done before.
And hope that they can find distributors that are interested, though. That's the thing too now.
Yeah.
Even locally, and throughout the U.S., there were so many distributors that were like really wanted certain import brands. Now, I don't think they care anymore. I think they're just looking at what's selling and what's not selling. And they're like, nah.
Yeah.
I hate to get on my high horse about this, but one of the things that you can't deny about the old days in beer was like, it wasn't cool necessarily, but it certainly wasn't profitable. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, wow, I'm going to get rich. When I got started with beer and like fell in love with beer, I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to make any money doing this, but I want more people to experience this stuff. And I want to meet more people in the game. I want to travel and I want to do this, and I just did it from pure passion. And now I think it's swung a little bit towards the other direction. People are definitely in it for money and profitability before passion. And I think it shows. That's going to cut off access to some of these brands. And I guess to your point, I hope that does happen. Some of these guys will just let them go and let some up and coming people with passion take a hold of them and see what they can do.
I always think that it's kind of, or I guess initially think that it's kind of old school people like yourself, like me, like Tom Peters, that are into just these old styles. But then, somebody new, every so often, somebody new comes along, somebody, 20 some odd years or 30 or 40 years younger than us. And not you and I, but, and then they're into it. And so
that's the best. It's the best when that happens. I mean, I remember this year, one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been Zoom classes for me. Like, it's been fun to have so many people interested in Zoom. And, Neighborhood Provisions, which is the company that we built to kind of bring all of our on-site experiences that we could no longer do at the restaurants and bring it to your door. And that saved our company back a year ago. But through that, I started selling like tastings and selling imports. And it's been pretty amazing to see how interested people are in imported beer on our site. They're interested in trying new stuff. They're returning to old favorites.
One of my friends who I did an interview with a few months ago, he runs a beer store, and he was noting that especially early on in the pandemic, so many of his customers were revisiting those old beers, and not necessarily imports. Like a Dogfish 60-minute IPA, Sierra Nevada, Allagash.
I was able to drink some Pliny the Younger on the bottle release this time, and I'm sure you've had that at Monk's when they would do their annual charity events and things like that. And obviously Monk's gets so much Russian River beer, which is incredible. But an old school kind of West Coast triple IPA like that is just so amazing. And so, it's great to see brewers like Russian River continue to have that popularity, even making kind of old school styles, like
Yeah.
with Tiny and stuff. And Three Floyds is starting to go national now. So we're
Yep.
launching Three Floyds in our area later this week. And I mean, I love Alpha King. I love Zombie Dust. I love these like old school West Coast beers. But I also remember when Zombie Dust was a Citra revelation and people had never tasted
Yeah.
anything like it, Another brewery I would talk about that I absolutely love, and it kind of ties into Sovereign and frankly imports, is Lost Abbey and Port Brewing. But I mean, Tommy Arthur, another spectacular human, great dude, and the beers that he makes are incredible. Anytime we'd have the opportunity, which we do a few times a year, to direct ship pallets of Lost Abbey beer to Sovereign for events and things like that, we would take it. And if there's a better, consistent producer, besides maybe, Allagash, of Belgian style beers than Lost Abbey. And I don't just mean like mixed firm, which is, taken over now. It's crazy. Now Saison has become synonymous with mixed fermentation, Brettanomyces. But I mean, I love clean Saison, as you do too. And there's nothing better than some of those beers that are just like Lost Abbey. They're just always so balanced.
You mentioned Allagash. Same thing with them. Beers are always fantastic. And once again, really nice people that work there.
Allagash is funny because they had a moment. I mean, the whole idea of mixed fermentation, sour beers in America, back 5 or 6 years ago, that was the next big thing, and it's been vanquished. People drink them obviously, and I do. We serve them all the time. But Jester King, Black Project, Crooked Stave, Allagash, they were really hanging their hats on a lot of those beers, and they still sell well and everything. But it's just interesting to see how things change.
Well, I mean, they got kind of beaten out by the pseudo sours, by the
fruited sours.
Yeah, whether it's supposed to be a Gose or supposed to be a Berliner or not really sure what the hell it is.
Yeah.
So just because we got off topic, do you want to run through a few of your locations?
Sure. We opened up a place called Owens Ordinary in Montgomery County, dedicated to really just trying to serve amazing beer in Montgomery County, because Montgomery County is a rough area to serve beer and alcohol in general, because there's a fourth tier there that there isn't anywhere else in the country. So if you want to serve beer in Montgomery County, you don't just buy from a distributor. You buy from the county, who buys from the distributor, and adds another layer of pricing on top. And so we went in to really try to say, like, okay, like in spite of the odds, let's create a really great beer bar here that showcases a lot of great Maryland beer, but also showcases great American and international styles, and did a great job there. We opened a second Rustico location in Arlington almost 10 years ago now, and that's been great, showcasing phenomenal beers alongside craft pizza. And the other thing that's so fun for me is being able to produce beer lists for all of our restaurants and bars that might not be primarily known as beer places. So like all of the Red Apron concepts, which are our butcher shop concepts, typically with restaurants associated. Nathan And is our butcher. He does an incredible job putting an incredible beer list there that cover all the flavor profiles, but in that case, focus on sour beers, because we love the way that sour beers and charcuterie go together. At chef-driven restaurants like Hazel, which has a kind of Middle Eastern flair, or at Iron Gate, which is more of a Mediterranean flair, to put together a beer list there that really suits the food is always a really fun part of what we do.
And then you got a chance to get a location in the Navy Yard and open your own brewery.
Yeah, I'm wearing my shirt here. 2013, we bit the bullet and opened our own brewery, Bluejacket. It's been going strong ever since. Basically, we like to go into neighborhoods that are really, really young and not yet developed, and try to get in there early and let the neighborhood kind of develop around us. No better example of that than Navy Yard in DC. Back in 2013, there weren't nearly as many breweries. There weren't nearly as many breweries committed to making as many different styles of beer and having large lists. It was more focused stuff, smaller lists. And we were like, well, basically wanted to do kind of like a Churchkey brewing, like let's try to have something in every flavor profile. But also we're restaurateurs, and we believe a lot in atmosphere and experience. And so we were looking for a space that had some height. Not a lot of DC buildings have a lot of height. There's height restrictions. And so we found an old Boilermaker factory. We're able to build a tiered brewing system, which you can see everything up as it is, rather than in a picture on the wall, and relied on the gravity system of old English power breweries to start with the brew house up top and then come down to fermentation and then to dispense on the ground floor. Built a brewery as much for the experience as for the beer itself. And Had a lot of really, really talented brewers with us along the way. Ro Gunzel is our current director of brewing operations. He's been with us for almost 4 years, which is half of the brewery's existence. He's incredible. Came to us from Kaltenberg Castle, Left Hand, and Great Divide. He knows German brewing styles inside and out. So, I'm loving all the classic stuff that we make. But probably the most exciting thing about Bluejacket is that back in 2013, we built a cool ship, having no idea how to make spontaneous beer. We talked to Jean Benoit, we asked questions, and then we experimented. But, we didn't commit as much time to it as we probably should have. So it took us a long time to really get there. And the thing with spontaneous beer is you only have one shot a year, and then you got to kind of wait and see how it goes. And we just kept struggling. And the other thing is that I have extremely high standards when it comes to that. Like, I didn't want to put out any spontaneous beer that I couldn't be proud of, and that I wouldn't proudly serve to somebody like Jean Benoit or Armand de Belder, Pierre Tilken. And so we waited. But, and then, ever since Ro came aboard 4 years ago, we've really made some big leaps. The beers have gotten better and better. And we released our first bottle of spontaneous beer last winter, called Borrowed Time, and it came out incredible, a blueberry lambic style spontaneous beer. And now we're about to come out with a spontaneous beer with cherries and raspberries. And so it's kind of a fun story. After 7 to 8 long years, we finally have some spontaneous beers that we really, really are proud of. We're really excited about. We've got a room full of barrels with great tasting spontaneous beers of different ages. So we feel like we found our niche. So excited to start pouring spontaneous beer in Navy Yard pretty consistently. And even just to have young spontaneous beer on draft at an inexpensive price so people can come in and drink, lambic inspired spontaneous beers with no fruit, the way that I love to do when I go to Brussels.
When we were talking at the end of 2020, you had said the brewery had aided all of the neighborhood restaurant group during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You were selling tons of canned beer, and it helped every other aspect of the company because you shuttered a few locations for the duration, right?
No, there's a bunch that aren't open.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that.
But they all intend to reopen. But yeah, you're right. No, when this all went down, we didn't have anything. We couldn't have anybody on site. We're like, what does the restaurant and bar business do? Luckily, we had a brewery and a great brewing team that was able to flip it and go from 95% on-premise draft business to 95% off-premise canned business. And this is another thing, about the connections we've made over the years with all these great people from all over the country. We've had interest in our beer being distributed and never could really do it. And then when this happened, we were like, does anybody want some cans? And people got into it. So, send a beer to Massachusetts, North Carolina, Louisiana, New York, Maryland, Virginia. That saved us.
That's amazing.
So in 2019, when the Nats won the World Series, we did 2,200 barrels of beer at Bluejacket. Most of it sold on site, which is great. Last year in a pandemic, we did 1,800 barrels of beer, 95% of it going off-site, if not more. Pretty impressive that we were able to almost keep up with production levels without selling hardly any draft beer.
Earlier you mentioned Neighborhood Provisions. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so Neighborhood Provisions is basically an online e-commerce site that delivers incredible beer, wine, bottled cocktails, coffee, tea, pastries, butcher cuts, prepared foods, locally sourced grocery to your door. Great event stuff, Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter, Passover. We put together these incredible experience packages too. We do a lot of clubs, whether it's a beer club, a coffee club, a wine club. It's kind of one-stop shopping for foodies, people who love beverage, and we'd like to think it kind of brings what we do on premise home. We're building experiences for you at home, and that's been a huge thing too. Between that and Bluejacket, that's really what kept us afloat until we could start reopening in the summer.
Where is that available?
DC, Virginia, Northern Virginia, and Montgomery County, Maryland. But that's one of the things we're working on now is expanding.
Now, right before the pandemic, you opened, I don't want to say your most ambitious project, but it's ambitious in the fact that you left your safe zone of the DC area and you went to the big bad city. You went to New York City and opened the Grand Delancey. What was the decision behind opening that? And, well, how have you done? Because obviously New York's brutal.
Yeah, and New York in the pandemic is even more brutal. So the idea behind it was, again, kind of like back to what I was saying early on. It's like we've always wanted to do projects elsewhere. We love traveling. We think that we do things differently and that a lot of cities we can create something that isn't available. And I love New York. Been going there my whole life. Tons of friends there. Love visiting. And we've looked at properties there and projects there for a long time. got approached by a great group opening the market line, a food hall down there, and with amazing vendors, an amazing wine program through People's Wine, and it just seemed like they're our types. They love great stuff, and so we were interested, and we got a great deal to go in and build a beer bar like we would build. And again, what's funny is I looked around New York and said, well, I don't think anybody's really doing what we want to do. High level service, but also curation. More beers from fewer brewers. And not just like, oh, it's new, it's local, throw it on and rotate it through and see what happens. Really having a high standard. But then again, making sure that alongside the new cool beers were also the classics. And it took off. And we opened end of November 2019, did well right through the holidays. January was good, February was better, March was going to be great, and then the pandemic happened. Luckily, through great partners up there and landlords who are extremely understanding and supportive. And then, through our team led by Sam Schwartz, our GM, who's just killed it. I mean, he's been unflappable in his commitment to keeping it going. I mean, it's been rough. We've had some outdoor seating, a little bit of indoor, created a retail shop, and somehow we're still around, we're surviving. And as indoor dining has opened back up, we've actually been pretty busy again. So I think our future is bright there. And it's exciting. I can't wait to be able to visit more and get up there more and do some more work.
And during the pandemic, you've actually extended in the home territory as well.
Exactly. We opened a project 3 years in the making. We partnered with a developer, May Riegler, to open an apartment building called the Blackbird in Southeast DC, not far from Bluejacket, not far from the Capitol building. And to fill the ground floor with a really cool food hall-esque experience. What's different about it is that it's anchored by two amazing bars. One, Show of Hands, which is yet to open, which is a low ABV cocktail bar and a natural wine bar. And then the other, which is open, Shelter, our low ABV bar. So again, 50 temp controlled drafts, a couple casks, and commitment to showing the best beers from all over the world, with a specific focus on lower alcohol beers to pair with, 8 different vendors making incredible food. So, it's not a food hall where you just walk around and get some food, whatever. It's more like 2 amazing bar experiences where you can order food from lots of different vendors run by the chefs in our group. Another one where delivery and takeout for food has been huge for us so far in the pandemic. Retail beverage has been huge for us. Bar business has been good, but once things open up again, I think the bar business is going to go through the roof, and we're going to have a real winner on our hands over there. And my goal has always been, and we'll see, because there's not a lot of draft beer available right now, but when it comes back, it'll be there, is that I want to have at all times up to 50% of the draft list under 5%.
Fantastic.
There's nothing like that. So hopefully we can work.
Is the coffee shop in that section, or is that somewhere else?
Yeah, Cameo. Nazia Khan, our coffee director, she's incredible. And Cameo is our coffee shop. We work with Parlor out of Brooklyn, which is a phenomenal coffee roaster with really, really transparent sourcing, support for growers, roasters all over the world. And it's a socially responsible coffee shop. It's bespoke. Every single decision we made was based on supporting the right businesses, supporting BIPOC businesses, female-owned businesses, environmentally responsible businesses, and being all of those things ourselves, utilizing compostables almost across the board, getting rid of plastic everywhere we can, and telling stories that encourage people to do all that. I mean, I can't think of another thing besides something bigger than coffee where you spend your money on coffee and coffee shops makes such an impact. And if you come to Cameo, you're going to get great coffee. You're going to pay a little more for it because we want to pay more for coffee, and we want those roasters to pay more for coffee so that the people actually growing and handling the coffee make the money that they deserve, or closer to that. Lord knows they're not there yet. And know that you're supporting a business that cares about the environment and all that great stuff. So I mean, that has been a huge thing for Cameo, and we're really excited to do more of those as we expand.
Last subject, and then we can wrap this up and you can get on with your life. I'd be remiss not to bring this up. So the Neighborhood Restaurant Group also has a nonprofit organization. Can you tell the viewers about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Arcadia, Michael Babin, who's our principal and my partner, started Arcadia back in 2010, I think, or 11. Arcadia is a center for sustainable food and agriculture. It is based out of Woodlawn Estate, one of George Washington's old plantations that's now run by the National Trust and operated by us in Mount Vernon in Virginia. And it's an incredible organization. Pam Hess is our director. It does so much for the food ecosystem. We train veterans. We have this great veteran farm training program. We host incredible food camps, summer camps for kids. We're working with hospitals and schools to help them have much better, healthier, and more affordable food, lunches, and things like that. Also, we have the mobile market, which is probably our biggest thing right now, where we work with local farms and purveyors to bring really, really phenomenal food to underserved areas, to food deserts, and prop up these markets. We take all manner of SNAP and all manner of things to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to have great food and make an impact on communities where access to food like that just isn't happening. So that's been something that has driven us. And Snallygaster, our giant beer festival that we used to do every year, we missed it in 2020. We're going to see about 2021. I'm real confident about 2022. 8,000 people on Pennsylvania Avenue drinking 400 beers from 150 brewers with the Capitol building as a backdrop. Bands, food happens in middle of October, typically every year. That is our biggest fundraiser annually for Arcadia. I'm proud about what we do as a restaurant group, and it's fun to talk about all the different facets of our group and all the different things that we have going on at any given time. I think we're making an impact and doing what we love.
In a concise little bit, overall, what are you trying to bring people, I guess? Is it a story? Is it a feeling? What in the end, what is it that you're looking to bring to a customer?
Yeah, I think the thread that runs through all of our businesses, and I don't want to be too quixotic here, is that, we're trying to make people happy. We're trying to, provide some release, some escape, something that's as visceral as it is intellectual. We're trying to create experiences around the enjoyment of food and beverage. Ever since I was a kid, my favorite moments were eating with my family and friends. And so I guess all along I knew I wanted to be part of that for the rest of my life. I mean, there's nothing better than sitting around eating, and now as an adult drinking with your family and friends. And even better when you're trying something new, or even better when you're returning to something old. Even better when somebody who's preparing it and pouring all of their passion into that can come out and tell you about it. I feel like we're giving you a great product, and then we're layering experience on top of that product.
That's it. It's been a pleasure as always. Let's talk more frequently now.
Yeah.
And hey, Philly needs a nice location.
I know. I wish. Give me an excuse to come up and see you.
There you go.
All right, buddy. Great seeing you. Thanks a lot.
See you, Greg. If you'd like to learn more about the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, their ventures, Arcadia Center for Sustainable Food and Agriculture, or Neighborhood Provisions, then check out NRG's website. The link's in the video's description. And if you've liked this or any of the other episodes of No Pants, then please subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.